But I would love to get your overall impressions about what you saw in the November election results and what that means for energy.
There's a recognition of energy demand. So to me, it sounds like lots of energy competing with China, kind of my big takeaway.
There will be, I'm convinced there will be an all of the above policy, except maybe with respect to offshore wind. And I think electric vehicles are having some difficulties.
All right. Well, I said that, there is an elephant in the room, and let's just get the elephant out in the open, which is what does the election mean for our industry? And we have two speakers, one Republican and one Democrat. And if you don't know Heather Reams and Clint Vince, you will after this panel, and you should definitely know them. Oh, there she is. Yeah. Hi. I was looking this way for you to come in that door. So these are two of my favorite people in Washington. Heather Reams is the president of the Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions, or CRES. It's a right-of-center nonprofit organization. It's based here in Washington, and it engages policymakers and the public about responsible, conservative solutions to address our nation's energy, economic, and environmental security while addressing our competitive edge. Heather is chair of the National Energy Week, which if you're in Washington, you are familiar with it. It's a week-long set of discussions, both with the Hill and other people working in the energy industry that really explores solutions to our energy issues. And she has been working in Washington in public affairs issues for 30 years, including nonprofits and on the Hill. 30, sorry, me too, I'm not hiding it. And then Clint Vince is one of the leading energy lawyers in the United States. He's the chair of Dentons' U.S. energy practice and co-chair of the Dentons' Global Transportation and Infrastructure sector for the U.S. If you haven't heard of Dentons, I don't know where you've been, because Dentons has been named the Energy Law Firm of the Year for 4 years in a row and 7 times in the last decade or so. Dentons is an incredible, and through Clint, is an incredible supporter of GridWise Alliance. We work with their policy advocates. They represent us on the Hill and in the federal government. They've been doing that since the infrastructure bill. So for about 4 years now. We get pro bono support as a general counsel from Justin Mirabal, and then we have the support and guidance and counsel of Clint Vince. So we're really appreciative of everything Clint does for GridWise. So if I could ask Clint and Heather to join me, we're gonna tackle what the election means for our industry. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So good to see you.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So let's set the stage. We know who won the White House and the two arms of Congress, but I would love to get your overall impressions about what you saw in the November election results and what that means for energy. Just big picture.
You want me to go first? Okay. I think the results, but also some of what's coming out of some of the news, initial thoughts are energy is going to be undergirding nearly everything that we're going to be talking about. We're energy focused here in this room. We think it's important, but it's going to be really important. A couple things that the President-elect Trump had talked about quickly after he received the nomination. Winning on election night was, talking about AI and winning AI, lowering energy prices, cutting them in half. So to me, that tells me a couple things. It tells me that there's a recognition of energy demand. I'm not saying that there's a full appreciation about the demand that's coming, because I don't know that many people really appreciate what's coming in terms of the demand for energy, but I think there's something there. And being competitive with China and winning the AI race. The second one is producing lots of energy in some way to lower costs. So I'm hopeful that this means all the above is really on the table. So those are kind of like my quick takes of what I heard. I'll also say in the beginning of the 118th Congress, when Republicans took over in the House, H.R. 1 was a energy bill being a priority. So I think you have a significant focus there with Republicans, both in the House but also in the Senate. And I think some of the picks, also coming out in terms of Governor Doug Burgum, Chris Wright, Lee Zeldin to some piece, and then is in terms of, these are not controversial picks like some others have been, and then a China hawk in the State Department, Marco Rubio. I think of him more as a China hawk, even before I think of him as a senator from Florida. So to me, it sounds like lots of energy competing with China. It's kind of my big takeaway.
Glenn?
Well, first of all, I'm so pleased to be here. And although Heather and I are different parties, I'm a terrific admirer of Heather. And I want to recognize my amazing teammate, Linda Willard, over here, who provides policy advice to GridWise and is our lead policy guru within the energy practice at Dentons. I think Heather is right on the money. I think initially my understanding is that the Senate Majority Leader would like to see things like immigration, energy, and defense spending taken up. I think the House Leader would like to see maybe go straight into tax cuts. I'm very impressed with the fact that the President-elect won all the key battleground states. I think that is something we need to pay attention to. But at the same time, the margins in the House and Senate are the thinnest they've been historically in 100 years. I think only the second thinnest margins ever. And that's going to make a big difference in terms of what can be done and not done. Also, I had the honor of co-chairing a law firm once that had incredible political luminaries. We had two former Senate Majority Leaders who were bipartisan, so we had Senators Mitchell and Dole. We had Dan Coates, Republican senator from Indiana, who went on to be head of national intelligence. Lloyd Benson, who had been chair of the Senate Finance Committee. My dear friend Ann Richards, and Governor of Texas, and Governor Jim Blanchard. And they impressed a couple of things on me. One is that anyone who sits here and tells you with absolute certainty before the president-elect has actually even come into his position and before the cabinet officials and their deputies, et cetera, are assigned, is someone that you should not listen to very carefully. So I'm going to try to talk in probabilities, but without certainty whatsoever. And I think that's important. It's early days right now. The other thing that Jim Blanchard taught me is that Michigan is a bellwether for elections. And it's interesting to look at Michigan right now. You have the president win, you have a popular Democratic governor, you have the state House of Representatives just turned over to Republicans, and the Senate is Democratic by, I think, 2 votes, and the election will be in 2 years. That demonstrates that everything right now is very, very tight and could be subject to change. I do think another thing to look at is the way the political pendulum has been swinging in the last several presidential changes. We had President-elect Trump in his first term came in and he undid all of the executive orders and key initiatives of President Obama. He tried to undo Obamacare, but was not successful because of tight margins in the Congress. Then we had Biden come in, undo all the executive orders of the Trump 1 administration that he could, maybe with the exception of some tariffs for China. And then we have President Trump coming back promising on day 1 to focus on the things Heather has talked about. I think in energy terms, he will immediately repeal some of executive orders, for example, dealing with decarbonization. He'll pull us out of the Paris Accord, which has been a ping pong ball between President Biden, President Trump, and now, or first President Trump, now President-elect Trump. There will be, I'm convinced there will be an all of the above policy, except maybe with respect to offshore wind. And I think electric vehicles are having some difficulties, will have some real serious headwinds. But why don't I stop there?
Okay. Well, let's talk about what early action on energy policy in the Trump administration looks like. Yeah, I remember, there's incoming administrations usually have kind of day one things, and they have the first 100 days. What does early action look like? And Trump did say that he would declare an energy emergency on his first day in office to bypass congressional approval for his plans. And what emergency do you think that he's responding to, and what do you think that looks like in the early days?
Go ahead. I have thoughts. And I'll build on what I was saying about those early pieces about talking about energy production, AI. Thinking about COVID and getting a vaccine. If you remember, the FDA. Talking to some of my friends at Pfizer, they had something prepared within about 3 weeks. It took another 4 to 5 months to get it through the regulatory hurdles, and that was fast, right? And for the government, that was really fast. I'm putting something very similar along the lines in terms of energy. Take that type of analogy and compound it with, let's call it like an arms race in the Cold War. I think that's what President Trump is looking at here. And the more I'm reading, the more I'm thinking about who he's putting in key departments, the more I think this makes sense in terms of competition with China. Again, talking about Marco Rubio at Department of State, looking at Doug Burgum, an innovative individual governor himself, first-time politician, being the governor of North Dakota, advising the president along the way on his campaign, and also the creation of this National Energy Council that is going to sit on the National Security Council. So Doug Burgum is also going to chair that. So you've got this dual role of interior plus this, not to say not the interior is very important, but also this very important new nebulous but kind of urgency with this council creating there. And then you've got an innovator practitioner over at the Department of Energy. So I think it's unleashing American natural gas for one, opening up lands, federal lands. But even if you produce all the natural gas in the world, we have a significant supply chain issue in terms of just building the products and getting them to market. So man cannot live on natural gas alone. And I think this is some of the realities that are going to come online with his advisors and others, and recognizing, whoa, this all the above maybe isn't so bad. And I agree also with some of the politics around offshore wind, EVs, and others. But what about hydrogen? What about solar? What about wind? What about co-location? What are some of these strategies that are that can be used for help? And then the bringing online of nuclear, right? We have nuclear that's coming back online that was retired, and then the ability to expedite nuclear as well. So I think all of this is on the table to put as much energy forward to be able to win the AI race. I think that the 3 times more of energy that we're using right now in the next 10, 15 years might even be an undervaluing. Maybe it's 3, 4, 5 times. And whatever that number is, I think this administration incoming is saying we need to beat it. We need to create it. So that's how you can say, like, hey, we're going to cut your energy prices in half. I mean, I don't know if you can really do that in markets. But I think these are signals to get ready and be part of the solution.
I think that's a really wise explanation. And I'm glad that Heather mentioned the National Energy Council, and former Governor Burgum will be Secretary of Interior, at least he's been nominated. I think he'll be accepted, and he will he will chair the National Energy Council. Chris Wright will be on that, and all of the different agencies that have anything to do with the production, distribution of electricity and energy will be on that council. So it's a really important place to look for early signals. I think it is going to be an all of the above council. I think that the mandate that has been expressed by President-elect Trump is to basically enable the United States to be the dominant energy country in the world. I think we're already maybe there, but he will try to put that on steroids. And I think to cut red tape, the second thing I just said might be a huge sleeper that's going to impact energy tremendously in ways that we're not exactly certain about right now, but I think it's something critically important to watch. You saw the Supreme Court in the Loper-Bright decision basically dismantle 40 years of Chevron deference for agency decision-making. You see the the Musk, Ramaswamy team trying to find ways to cut the size of different agencies and make them more efficient in their view. And you see that the likelihood is that Trump will reintroduce something most people have never heard of that could, if introduced, be incredibly important, and that is Schedule F, which would give the president the right to terminate positions in federal agencies without cause, without explanation. And that was passed by executive order in the first Trump administration. It was rescinded immediately by the Biden administration. I think that's going to be a early day thing. And I think there's going to be tremendous disruption with agencies that we look to, FERC, Department of Energy, other agencies that are subject to the Administrative Procedure Act. So I would keep an eye on that because I think it's going to have a lot more impact than people realize today. I agree with Heather that all of the above should include nuclear. It seems to be bipartisan support. And also, I hope hydrogen. We're working on a huge hydrogen project to develop demand markets for hydrogen. The economics are tough, but I hope our work will solve that to some extent. I think offshore wind is in trouble, but it was already in trouble in the US because of cost differentials. Production of oil and gas at an increased level, I'm seeing, I'm ready to dance. I'm seeing oil and gas officials saying that'll probably be determined more by the marketplace than by government policies. And I'll stop there.
And in fact, Mark, Gabriel, and I were just talking yesterday about the oil and gas industry's move to electrify. So when we talk about the growing demand for electricity, it isn't just coming from AI and data centers. It's coming from domestic manufacturing and in many instances, the electrification of the oil and gas industry. So that kind of further emphasizes the importance of the grid. And one of the big things, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, that we work very hard on were the grid funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law. And also our members care very much about the tax incentives that are in the Inflation Reduction Act. So what's your prediction on the fate of Uncle Bill and Uncle Ira?
So, well, I want to. There's a new fold today, I think, or we got last night. It was a chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, Representative Guthrie from Kentucky. So we didn't have an E&C chair. Now we have an E&C chair that just needs to be formalized by kind of a procedural vote. So another kind of data point to be able to read those tea leaves to figure out what the heck is going on, right? So I was involved in that letter of the 18 members of Congress who wrote to the speaker saying, hey, let's be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the IRA specifically. It didn't include IIJA there, but and those members, and talking with many of those members, most of whom are coming back, know they don't have the political capital to defend everything. But I think the speaker's response to that letter and what his rhetoric was, let's take a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, that keeps getting quoted over and over again, although he hasn't really lent his hand to anything else beyond that. Right? So that was pre-election when he said it. Now you've got Republican majority, albeit, as Clint said, very narrow majorities, but they are majorities. I think there is this impetus to have like this big wave, like Republican wave, we won, and there is no wave. It's tiny, but it is a trifecta, and they do have the ability to use reconciliation. Republicans do. If you like bipartisanship, you don't like reconciliation. I'm not a fan of it because it creates uncertainty. This wave one side to the other. This is how we got the IRA, and we're having this makes boom, but then this uncertainty. So I think that there is going to be. Lots of us are having these conversations, but if something is a tax credit is going on for 10 years, it might go to 5 years. Something may be rescinded in total. I think the 30D tax credit for electric vehicles is a challenge. Elon Musk, by the way, is not a fan of that, tax credit, but it's also a competitive advantage. About why he is also looking at it. Advanced manufacturing, very important. I think that they're going to see businesses go to the mattresses for that one. So there's the tech neutral tax credit. Should it go to tech neutral? How much does it cost? The guidance isn't totally out yet. So I think there's still a number of questions, and members really aren't articulating where they're willing to lean in. So I think the good old-fashioned public affairs of geography, location, where things are being built, talking to your member of Congress will be incredibly important, especially as the administration on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue is making decisions. You're going to need your champions, so to speak, in the House and the Senate to be able to make those phone calls to the higher-ups in the White House and in the administration to say, whoa, wait a minute, are you aware this is happening? There's also so much happening through the IIJA and IRA in terms of investment and growth, and Representative Guthrie himself already has a massive plant that's in his district, and these are like I say peppered, but more than peppered, covered throughout the country. Whoa, did you realize that this technology is happening for this innovation? And I think it's going to be this. Wait a minute. I think there's going to be like this. We need to take stock about where everything is happening. If I'm in the administration, I'm incoming. I want to know where the investments are to be able to say, maybe this is a scalpel. This is not a sledgehammer. That's what we're going to be working towards. I think there's a lot of members of Congress, Republicans, who agree with this, who do not want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They need to hear from people like you. They need to hear from leaders and industry explaining about the investments and why industry is investing more, because they're incentivized. So every dollar spent in the government is not another dollar that's spent in one way. The investments from the private sector are significantly more than a one-to-one ratio. I think so. Those pay-fors and those discussions about is it either going to be the renewal of the Trump tax credits, or you're going to have IRA tax credits. It's a false choice. That if we're going to be in that position, the IRA is going to lose, because we're talking about $2,000 in everyone's pocket, each household's pocket per year. And people are going to say, forget those green subsidies. I want the $2,000. So if we're picking and choosing like that, we're screwed. We can't do that. We really have to go in and talk about how the government is creating an incentivized base for industry to come in and help us win, lead, energy dominance, and be the leader of the free world. It's quite extraordinary about where we are right now. and some of the simplicity of the messaging that I'm hearing versus what we're up against is it's clashing for me in a way that I feel this urgency to educate in a pretty big way.
Yeah. Clint, maybe you can talk about the IIJA funds. You know, when that bill passed, it was a multi-year appropriations bill, meaning that Congress gave the agencies the money to spend over the course of 3 or so years. And not all the money has been spent yet. So what's the potential for the possibility of agencies not actually spending the money that Congress gave them?
I think the potential exists. A lot of money has been spent. And I think the Congressional Review Act, which administrations often use in the early days to go back 6 months and sort of stop any initiatives of the prior administration, probably won't impact the bipartisan infrastructure law as much because the Biden administration worked hard to get a lot of stuff out more than 6 months ago.
Yeah.
It was part of the strategy. Things like transportation, there will be other elements of the bipartisan infrastructure law that are important to both parties. So I tend to agree with Heather. The most likely scenario, the probability is that there will be changes to it, but not wholesale changes. I think the same thing is true with respect to the IRA. I'm so glad that you and some other key people got in early, got that letter with 18 members in total writing to the speaker saying, please, don't take a sledgehammer, use surgery. And I'm told by our team that there are as many as 20 additional members in the House, maybe more now, that also agree with that. So the probability is...
There were a lot who didn't sign on.
Yes.
So you're right.
And there are so many, to your good point, there's so many constituents in red states that benefit from the IRA. Think back on the, each administration sort of gets one piece of legislation, signature legislation in the first 2 years. And then often in the mid-year election, the incumbent loses a lot of seats. If you think about Obama, it was Obamacare. Trump won, was not able to overturn that. It was too embedded. I think the IRA now is really embedded. And it got passed by only a gnat's whisker, if you recall, but it is there now. And so I think what I'm hearing is what has already been said. EVs, offshore wind are in jeopardy, but probably consistent with the all of the above strategy, a lot of the other tax credits will remain, I think, will remain intact.
Let's talk a little bit about the regulatory landscape. Do you anticipate that FERC will take a new approach to electricity with a Trump-appointed chair?
Want me to do that?
Yeah, you go first. I have a couple thoughts, but not like you will.
I think that it's almost certain that Trump will appoint a Republican chair. That is traditionally the case. The major question will be whether Willie Phillips stays in office or takes any one of a lot of potential
Several opportunities that would allow him to buy a house on the shore.
Which selfishly, we both have houses on the Eastern Shore, so we would like that a lot. But I think Willie Phillips has 17 months left in his appointment, so it does not expire till June of next year, and or 2026. And so that, if he stays for a bit, that would leave a 3-person majority at FERC, Democratic majority, even with the chair who controls the staff. And to some extent, the agenda would be Republican. In terms of who the president might choose, if Chairman Phillips stays on, probably Commissioner Christie, because he has seniority. If Chair Phillips retires, then it's quite possible that the president would pick a chair that is aligned completely with his policy direction. And again, I think there's going to be a lot of disruption for government agencies. As an attorney, I think there's going to be just an unprecedented amount of litigation by all ideologies. And the problem with Loper-Bright, throwing the final decision-making, transferring it from administrative agencies to the judiciary, is that under any political philosophy, the judiciary is probably the worst place to be determining very complex issues of that the expertise of independent agencies typically handles. And it takes longer, actually, as long as some of the agency decision-making can take. I do think there will be a huge push toward permitting reform. I'm not sure either of us mentioned that initially, but that's...
I was going to ask you.
That's going to be...
Go for it.
Okay. That's going to really be critically important no matter what. It should have been done long ago, and it will affect this group. The other thing, the reason I think FERC is still very relevant, if you haven't read a recent, it was either an op-ed or a foreign affairs piece by Jason Bordoff, who created the climate group at Columbia University. He's one of my favorite guys, good friend. He was an assistant national security advisor years ago. His message that has great importance for this group is, instead of drill, baby, drill, we should be saying build, baby, build. Karen has pointed out, and Mark pointed out earlier, that we have tremendous demand right now, that our infrastructure is not ready to meet. You know that better than anyone. We need to do a lot and get a lot of approvals, be able to build transmission, but also projects much more quickly to meet the infrastructure. In addition to representing a lot of power suppliers and utility type of organizations, co-ops, munis, and private power, we represent Amazon. And they have needs this year and next year that they can't meet in terms of their demand. So there's going to be gigantic push on that. So read Jason Bordoff's piece, and hopefully we'll build, baby, build, and do it more quickly.
And I think Jason's piece really develops a message that works really well for us, and I have read it multiple times, and it's about, what we've heard from Trump in the campaign and recently is this focus on developing oil and gas resources, which is, he may be able to increase, but we have just been going gangbusters on natural gas production and oil production. But he makes the case that the Trump administration really should be focused on electricity, and for a whole set of reasons that we've kind of articulated, that we will continue to articulate for the next couple of days. But it's a really elegant message piece that I think we all need to absorb, because it explains in a very concise way what I think the environment that they're working in and how we develop a set of priorities. So Ed, do you want to say anything about FERC?
I thought you might have written
that I might have
piece
written
for
it?
him.
Well,
Yeah.
you might have read something I wrote and then wrote his piece. I don't know.
I was, if you're reading, had a chance to grab the Politico this morning. I think it was this morning. There's an article talking about in FERC and talking about the independent agencies and like FTC and SCC, how there's a push for an alignment in some way with independent agencies. FERC being on this as well. Running things by the White House first, which isn't really independent. So I think there's I see a little bit of a little bit of a rub here, coming down. And then it also referenced times when there were other presidents that did this on both sides of the aisle. So I can see there being some rub at FERC. Not the first time Trump has had a rub with FERC.
Well, I think you think about Neil Chatterjee coming in from the Hill, thinking that he could create policy at a regulatory agency, and quickly coming around to what actually happens at FERC. And I'm actually encouraged by the creation of the National Energy Council, because when I worked at DOE, we did the Quadrennial Energy Review, which was, we were the lead. It was actually a White House initiative that brought together 22 different agencies that had some equity in energy. And we didn't even get all of the different agencies that dealt in energy. And so having somebody in the White House, or who really is trying to coordinate energy across all these agencies, I think is really important. And I agree that when we came up with policy recommendations, FERC was the first to tell us that we couldn't do that, because that's not what FERC does. So in their mind, the lawyers were looking, no, we can't make that kind of recommendation. And so I think it's going to be.
I'm glad you brought up the National Energy Council, because it has the power to be fairly significant. I mean, a lot of us in this room are like, we need this, we need to do this, we need to do this. Now there's actually this funnel, this coordinating agency that ideally will be able to take this in and get the best recommendations. And we know, for instance, the grid needs a lot of work, for instance. We need modernization. This seems to me like an administration that really wants to look at this. I know there were concerns about decarbonization, and there always are from administration to administration, especially with Republicans, albeit I think it's getting better with the acknowledgement of climate change. But I think there's also this opportunity of having a highly efficient grid, talking about that and bringing some of the best practices forward. So I'm hoping it's not the one guy who's coordinating, but a team of people who are going into the White House who are really committed to this. So a girl can dream, my fingers are crossed, but that's what it sounds like.
Well, and Doug Burgum, North Dakota, he pledged to make the state carbon neutral. So this is not someone who.
I was working with Doug Burgum when he was governor, and if you know much about him, he's an entrepreneur, he's a tech guy. He sold his company to Microsoft. He worked for Microsoft. He's good friends with Bill Gates. You know anything about Bill Gates, you know that he's an innovation-forward person when it comes to energy through his breakthrough energy and breakthrough ventures. So I like, and Doug Burgum was an innovative guy, just not beyond energy, how he handled issues with education. And I mean, it was something that you would just listen to him at the Republican Governors Association and go, that is totally someone who's not from public policy, out of the box thinker. Also a really nice guy. So very approachable. So I'm encouraged by what I see, but I'm not trying to underplay the uncertainty this brings, but I think there's also opportunity.
Let's go to the uncertainty of supply chain. You mentioned supply chain, and Clint and I have talked about it too, and I think that is one of the big issues that's affecting the speed of this transition, or even the speed of the build out in both the transmission and distribution system. How do you think that Trump's energy and trade policies will affect the grid industry's supply chain?
Well, this is
just asking for predictions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been hearing a lot about tariffs, right? And economists will say that increasing tariffs is going to increase prices on everybody. There are tax credits that are to onshore what's coming to come into the United States and do more. There's more and more of that. I think tariffs are a real challenge. I'm not clear about what the tariffs mean. I mean, like when they're going to happen, if they're going to be by executive order. Clint, I don't know if you've got a better read on the tariffs than I have, but he's talked about them and thrown them out there. We need to do this, and it's more to stick it to China. There are plenty of ways to stick it to China. But I think the idea of critical minerals, I think making an emergency stockpile of critical minerals, for instance, for an EO would be something that makes sense to me. The processing that's going on. If graphite, I think 100% is coming from China right now, in the processing. So there's minimal processing in the United States. I think these type of statistics could very much concern the incoming administration. They concern this administration now, but I think when you're looking at an emergency, having to do things and recognizing that there's more tension with China, being overly reliant on China, you're going to try to remove that as much as possible. So I think trying to onshore is going to be a huge priority. I think reducing regulations, barriers to build, barriers to mine, what Congress is talking about in permitting is incredibly important. I think this administration is trying to try to do more to get government out of the way to be able to build what we need. Easier said than done, as I hear him sitting on stage with two great people and a great audience talking about this. But I think this is the type of conversations that are happening down at Mar-a-Lago. How are we going to streamline permitting? How are we going to get the government out of the way? How are we going to win and compete with China? Anything that's in a policy that's going to then enrich China is going to be off the table. And I think that's why the tax credits are at risk, because so many of the supply chain is reliant on China. This is also a huge opportunity for our allies and other developing worlds to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, we want to get in. Mexico, hey, I want to get in here. Argentina, South Africa, Australia, South Korea, we want to get in here. And I think, and then of course, in the developing world that are rich with natural resources that are looking to play ball with the United States. To talk to a number of people who have businesses in Africa who are quite excited by the opportunities to get in the game, so to speak, and take some of that market share away from China. I'll stop there.
Great points. We're 20 years behind on supply chain, and I think it's one of the biggest threats for this group and the country at large. And I don't think we even fully understand the scope and magnitude of how far behind we are. We're not going to be able to decouple our economy with China instantly. And, just look at the ban China put through on 3 critical minerals that I can't probably properly pronounce, but are extremely important. I mean, big shot across the bow. Tariffs are not going to invite greater cooperation on supply chain. I think we do need, I'm glad to see some innovators like Governor Bergen coming in, because we're going to need tremendous innovation on accelerating our access to critical minerals. And also, we're changing from what I thought of as a more secure, globalized economy 15 years ago. We're now more of we've got a lot of geopolitical warfare, where energy warfare is now a big part of it, not just in Europe, but with Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but well beyond that. And I think that China's so far ahead of us on renewables, on supply chain. They've been dealing with Africa for at least 20 years, maybe even a little longer than that, and now Latin America. And we need to change our whole approach on that. One compliment, I think the quadrennial energy review that you mentioned is one of the best pieces of work on energy infrastructure that I've ever seen. I think you should sneak it to Heather, have her redact all your names and get it to the National Energy Council. You and Melanie Kenderdine and others did an incredible.
Carl Peckman in the back.
Carl
there.
Peckman,
Yeah.
one of my other heroes. Yeah.
And we did get, out of the 70-something recommendations, Congress enacted 40-something of them. And then we did the second edition was all on electricity, but that came out in January of 2021. So there's some fun things you could do with that report.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it was so
Well, thank you
good.
for that.
Yeah.
Well, I take your admonition from your famous friends that we are dealing with predictions and forecasts, and I'm hoping that we can reconvene this wonderful panel in about 6 months, and you can interpret what's happened in that 6 months and make some further projections.
I've been wrong about nearly everything in the past few years.
Well, join me in thanking this panel, Heather and Clint. And
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask the next panel to come forward, but I was remiss in telling you that what's on the back of your badge is the code that if you scan it, it will take you to the agenda. And there may be an agenda change later this afternoon that we're working on, and we'll let you know as we work that out. But if you need to know where you're going and what you're going to see, and you can use that QR code. So thank you very much.